Hello, seventh period, and this is the second segment of your English homework. The segment starts on page 76. So, page 76. Zhukov said to Kogas, "Don't start counting up all the years you've got to go. Whether you'll be here for the whole 25 years or not is anybody's guess. All I know is I've done 8 of mine, that's for sure." So you just went on living like this with your eyes on the ground, and you had no time to think about how you got in and when you would get out. In his record, it said Shukov was in for treason, and it's true, he gave evidence against himself and said he had surrendered to the enemy with the intention of betraying his country and come back with instructions from the Germans. But just what he was supposed to do for the Germans, neither Shukov nor the interrogator could say. So he just left it at that and put down on instructions from the Germans. The way Shukov figured was very simple. If he didn't sign it, he was as good as buried. But if he did, he'd still go on living a while. So he signed. Okay, guys, that part's really important. What's implied there is Shukov is wrongfully imprisoned. Shukov was pretty much forced to he was forced to say that he was forced to say that he betrayed his country and that he committed treason, when in actuality he didn't really do anything. But he felt forced to say that he did, so that otherwise, if he didn't say that he did, they would kill him. All right, so he's being wrongfully imprisoned, and if he didn't admit to being guilty, they would have killed him. So that's why he admitted to being guilty. All right, let's go on. It happened like this. In February of 42, his whole army was cut off the northwestern front. They didn't send any food by air, there just weren't any planes. Then things got so bad they cut the hoofs off dead horses, soaked them in water to soften them up a little, and ate them, and they didn't have any ammo. The Germans tracked them down in the woods and rounded them up. Zhukov spent a couple of days in a powell cage in the forest. Then he got away with 4 others. They made their way through the forest and the bogs and got back to their own lines. And when they got there, a machine gunner opened fire. 2 of them were killed on the spot, and another died from his wounds, so only 2 of them made it. If they had had any sense, they would have said they got lost wandering in the woods, then nothing could have happened to them. But they told the truth and said they had gotten away from the Germans. From the Germans, you mother blank. If all 5 of them had made it, maybe they had checked their stories and believed it, but just 2 of them didn't have a chance. It was quite clear, they said, that they'd fixed up their escape with the Germans, the bastards. Deaf as he was, Senka Klepshin could hear what they were talking about and said in a loud voice, "I got away 3 times and they caught me every time." Senka had really been through the mill. Most of the time he didn't talk. He couldn't hear what people said and usually kept his mouth shut. So they didn't know much about him. All they knew was he'd been in Buchenwald and was in the camp underground there. He had smuggled arms in an uprising. Then the Germans hung him up with his arms tied behind his back and beat him. "But what kind of camps were you in for those 8 years, Ivan?" Kogas asked. "Most of the time you've been in those ordinary camps with women where they don't make you wear numbers. But 8 years in a penal camp is a different story. Nobody's ever come out of this alive." "We didn't have any women. All I ever saw was logs." He stared into the fire and remembered his 7 years in the north, the way he had hauled logs for 3 years to make crates and railroad ties. The campfire used to flicker just like this in the lumber camp, when they had to work at night, that is. The commandant's rule was any gang that didn't do its quota in the daytime was kept on the job at night. They used to get back to the camp after midnight and go out again in the morning. "Don't kid yourselves, fellows. It's easier here," he said in his funny way. He had that gap in his teeth. "Here you knock off the same time every day, quota or no quota. They march you back to the camp, and the basic ration is 6 ounces more. You can live. So what if this is the special camp? Do the numbers bother you or something? They don't weigh anything." "The hell, it's easier," Fetikov hissed. It was getting close to the meal break, and they were all drawn up around the stove. "They slit your throat here while you're in bed. You call that easy?" "That happens only to squealers, not human beings." Pablo put a finger up like he was warning Fetikov. It was true. This was a new thing in the camp. 2 stool pigeons meaning like 2 men who had ratted out their fellow campmates, 2 men who had basically tattletaled on 2 of their campmates. That's what stool pigeons mean. So 2 stool pigeons had their throats slit right in their bunks after revel. And then they killed a guy who was really straight. They must have gotten him mixed up with somebody else. And one of the squealers beat it to the punishment block and got them to hide him there. It was a funny business, this. It never happened in the ordinary camps, and it was something new here, too. The whistle on the steam engine went off. It didn't go off full blast right away, but sounded kind of hoarse at first, like it was clearing its throat. They had gotten through half a day. It was mealtime. Hell, they had been slow. They should have gone to the mess hall long ago to get in line. There were 11 gangs on the site, but the mess hall wouldn't hold more than 2 at a time. Tyrion hadn't come back yet. Pavel gave a quick look around and said, Shukik and Kopchik, you come with me. Kill Gus when Kopchik gets back to you. Send the gang along at once. Other fellows moved into their places by the stove right away. It could have been a woman the way they cuddled up to it. Snap out of it, somebody shouted. Let's have a smoke. They looked at each other to see who'd light up, but nobody did. Either they didn't have any tobacco, or if they did, they weren't letting anybody know. Shukov went out with Pablo, and Kopchik trotted after them. It's a little warmer, Shukov said when they got outside. About 1 degree below, no more. Good weather for bricklaying. They turned around and looked at the bricks. A lot had already been thrown up to the scaffold, and some were already on the floor of the second story. Shukov squinted up at the sun to check what the captain had said about the law. Out here in the open, where there was nothing to stop it, the wind was blowing quite hard and bit your face to let you know it was still January. The mess hall on the working site was just a wooden shack with a stove in the middle. They'd nailed rusty metal sheets over it to cover the cracks. Inside it was split up into a kitchen and an eating room. There were no floors in either part. The earth had been trampled down by people's feet and was full of pits and bumps. And what they called the kitchen had just a square stove with a cauldron. The kitchen was run by 2 people, the cook and a sanitary inspector. When they left in the morning, the cook got an issue of groats from the big kitchen in the camp. It worked out to about 2 ounces a head, about 2 pounds for each gang. That is, a little over 2 pounds for everyone working on the site. The cook didn't carry that stuff himself on the 2-mile march from the camp. He had a trustee who carried it for him. He thought it was better to slip an extra portion of the stuff to a trustee at the expense of the prisoners' bellies, rather than break his own back. Okay, so guys, did you pick up on that? So the cook pretty much bribes one of the prisoners to carry the stuff for him. So he ends up giving extra portions of food to for any camper who's willing to carry up the stuff for him. But the problem is, if you're giving one prisoner extra food, other prisoners get less food. Okay, let's keep going. Then there was water and firewood to carry and the stove to light. The cook didn't do that either. He had other prisoners and goners to do it. And they got their cut too. It's easy to give away things that don't belong to you. The rule was you had to eat inside the mess hall, so they had to bring bowls from the camp every day. They couldn't leave them on the site overnight because they'd be pinched by free workers. So they brought about 50 of them over and washed them for each new batch that came in to eat. And the man who carried the bowls got his cut. To stop people taking the bowls out of the mess hall, they put another trustee at the door. But they could watch as much as they liked. People took them out all the same. They talked their way past the trustee or slipped by while he wasn't looking. So on top of all this, they had another fellow who had to wander around the site and pick up dirty bowls and take them back to the kitchen. Both these got their cuts too. All the cook did was put groats and salt in the cauldron, and there was any fat, he split it up between the cauldron and himself. The good fat never got as far as the prisoners. Only the bad stuff went in the cauldron. So what did they care? The fat the stores handed out was no good. Then his only job was to stir the mush, and when it was nearly ready. The sanitary inspector didn't even do that much. He just sat and watched. When the mush was ready, the cook gave him some right away and he could eat all he wanted. And so could the cook. Then when the gang bosses, they took turns, a different one every day, came to taste it and to see if it was good enough for the men to eat. He got a double portion too. So what you want to get is, guys, the leaders of the camp, the leaders of these sites will get extra food while the prisoners would go even hungry and barely got enough to eat. All right? Okay, let's keep going. After all this, the whistle went off. Now the other gang bosses came, and the cook handed them their bowls through a kind of hatch in the wall. The bowls had this watery mush in them, and you didn't ask how much of the ration they'd really put in it. You'd get hell if you'd open your mouth. The wind was whistling over the plain. It was hot and dry in summer and freezing cold in winter. Nothing would ever grow on that plain, even without the barbed wire. The only grain they knew about grew in the place where they handed out the bread ration, and oats ripened only in the camp stores. And you could kill yourself with work here, or you could lay down and die. But you'd never beat any more food out of this earth than what the commandant handed over. And you didn't get that in full either. What with the cooks and all their pals? They stole all the way down the line, out here on the site in the camp and in the stores too. And you never saw these thieves doing any hard work, but it was you who sweated and you took what they gave you and didn't hang around the hatch. It was every man for himself. Pavlo, Shukov, and Kopchik went into the mess hall. The men were standing jammed up against each other. So many backs you couldn't even see the low tables or the benches. Some were eating sitting down and others on their feet. Gang 82 had been digging holes in the open the whole morning, came in, first after the whistle and grabbed all the seats. Even if they had finished eating, they still hung around. Where else could they get a little warmth? The others were swearing at them, but you might just as well swear at a brick wall. What did they care? It was better here than out in the cold. Pablo and Shukov pushed their way through. They come out a good time. One gang was getting its stuff, another was waiting in line, and the assistant gang bosses were standing by the hatch, too. This meant 104 was next in line. Bulls, bulls, the cook shouted through the hatch, and people were shoving them at him from the other side. Shukov got some bulls, too, and shoved them through the hatch, not to get anything extra for himself, but to speed things up. Some of the cook's pals were washing the bowls in the kitchen, and they weren't doing it for nothing. All right, guys, that's the end of the second segment. That's the end of the second segment of your reading homework. Don't forget, you need 5 annotations total. God bless you.